For 30 years, billionaire Adrian Cavalli lived with a silence no amount of success could drown, a silence carved from the disappearance of his little brother, a mystery that time itself had chosen never to answer. But on an ordinary morning in a mansion built on triumphs and ghosts, a single trembling voice shattered the quiet and forced the past to step back into the light. "Sir, that boy lived with me at the orphanage." The maid's trembling voice sliced through the golden silence of the mansion's corridor. Her words hung in the air like a haunting echo, fragile, yet powerful enough to shatter the serenity that wealth had built. The billionaire Adrian Cavalli turned slowly, his gaze fixed on the old portrait hanging above the marble fireplace. The boy in the painting, those wide, innocent eyes, that faint half-smile, wasn't just a stranger from the past. He was identical to the brother Adrian had lost more than 3 decades ago. A sharp ache bloomed in his chest, the kind that memory brings when it claws its way back to the surface. The maid, her name was Lila, a quiet black woman who had started working at the estate only 2 weeks earlier, stood trembling, her hands clutching the edge of her apron as if holding herself together. "I knew him," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of remembrance. "We called him Daniel at the orphanage. He never spoke of his family, but he used to say he had an older brother, a brother who called him my little champion." Adrian's breath caught. The air seemed to thicken, time folding upon itself as the echoes of childhood laughter and a mother's piano notes came rushing back. For years he had buried the pain, pretending that success could fill the void left by his brother's abduction. But now, as Lila's words settled like dust over his heart, Adrian understood this wasn't coincidence. The past had found him again in the voice of a woman who remembered what the world had chosen to forget. Adrian's gaze lingered on the portrait long after Lila's words faded into silence. The boy's painted eyes seemed to follow him, accusing, pleading, remembering. For 30 years, Adrian had lived with that same gaze etched into his soul. His younger brother, Marco, had vanished when he was only 4 years old, snatched away from a sunlit Sunday morning in the city park. Adrian could still remember the scream, the one that tore through their mother's throat when she realized her baby was gone. Their family had once been perfect. His father, a sharp-minded lawyer with a tender heart. His mother, a gentle music teacher who filled the house with Chopin and the smell of jasmine tea. And then Marco disappeared, and everything beautiful in their world went quiet. The search had lasted months. Police sirens, newspaper headlines, interviews that turned to whispers, then silence. The case went cold, the trail vanished, and with it their family's warmth. His mother withered slowly, her hands still hovering over piano keys that no longer made a sound. His father buried himself in work, his love for justice turning brittle and empty. And Adrian, only 8 at the time, was left with a promise he had whispered to the wind, "I'll find you, Marco. I swear I'll bring you home." But promises made in childhood have a cruel way of becoming ghosts. As the years passed, Adrian built walls, first with ambition, then with fortune. He became a man whose name opened doors and silenced rooms. Yet inside him there was always that small, trembling voice of a boy calling for his brother. And now here he was, standing in the echoing hallway of his mansion, a monument to everything he'd achieved and everything he'd lost. The golden chandeliers, the marble floors, the vast emptiness, they all mocked him with their perfection. No amount of wealth could erase the sound of a mother's sob or the weight of an empty chair at the family table. Lila watched him from the doorway. Her eyes held something Adrian hadn't seen in years, empathy that didn't pity him. She seemed to understand without words that his fortune was built not on triumph but on grief disguised as success. "Some losses," she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself, "don't fade with time. They just learn to wear suits." Adrian turned toward her, the corners of his mouth tightening as he exhaled. Her words landed deeper than she could have known. For the first time in decades, the fortress around his heart cracked, and through it the faint echo of a piano note seemed to return, trembling and unfinished, like a memory waiting to be played again. Before we continue, take a moment to breathe. If this story has already stirred something in you, stay with us. There's still so much left: questions, answers, and revelations. And if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. The next morning, Adrian found Lila standing beneath the portrait once more. Her dark hands were clasped tightly before her apron, her eyes glistening with something between fear and faith. Winter light filtered through the tall windows, painting soft gold over her face as she spoke, her voice trembling like a confession long kept in the dark. "Sir, the boy in that picture," she began quietly. "I knew him by another name. We called him Daniel. He lived with me in the St. Gabriel orphanage until he was 14. Adrian froze mid-step. The sound of his heartbeat filled the silence between them. "Daniel," he echoed, as if testing the word against memory. Lila nodded. "He used to say he was taken from a rich family, that his brother called him my little champion. No one believed him. They said it was a dream a child made up to survive." Her voice cracked. "But I believed him." Adrian's throat tightened. "My little champion." That was what he used to call Marco every time they played soccer in the garden. His knees weakened, and he gripped the back of a chair as the walls around him blurred into memory. "What happened to him?" he whispered. Lila swallowed. "He was brought to the orphanage at 6. They said his parents had died in a car accident, that he had no relatives. But he never stopped drawing that same house, that same piano. He said one day his brother would find him." Her words landed like raindrops on a drought heart. Adrian saw it, the boy's trembling hand holding a crayon, sketching a home he could barely remember, whispering a name no one believed in. He had been there, so close, hidden in plain sight while the world moved on. Then one day, Lila whispered, he disappeared. After a fight at the orphanage, he ran away. We searched for him for weeks, but he was gone. Adrian's breath came shallow. He turned to the portrait again, tracing the outline of the boy's face with trembling fingers. "All these years," he murmured. "He was alive. He was waiting." Lila stepped closer. "Sometimes, sir, the past doesn't die. It just hides until someone is brave enough to look." That night, Adrian didn't sleep. The mansion, usually silent and orderly, felt haunted by echoes. He could no longer ignore the laughter of a child, the clinking of piano keys, the rustle of his mother's silk dress as she whispered Marco's name into the dark. He wandered from room to room, searching not for comfort, but for traces of the boy who had once filled their home with joy. Every photograph, every shadow seemed to ask the same question. "Why didn't you keep looking?" By dawn, he had made his decision. "We're going to Brookhaven," he told Lila. They drove for hours through the countryside until the road narrowed into a winding path lined with jacaranda trees. The orphanage at the end stood tired and gray, its walls cracked with time but still holding the faint laughter of children long gone. An elderly nun answered the door, Sister Beatrice. When Adrian showed her the portrait, her face drained of color. "My God! That's Daniel. I remember him. Quiet boy, always drawing, always waiting by the gate at sunset." When Adrian asked how he arrived at the orphanage, her voice trembled. "He was brought by a woman claiming to be a state social worker. She had documents, birth certificate, death records for his parents. Everything looked official. But the papers, they were false. We learned too late. A cold shiver moved through Adrian. Marco hadn't vanished into nothing. He had been hidden behind forged papers. Sister Beatrice led them to her small office and retrieved a worn leather folder. "He left something behind," she said. Inside was a single sheet of yellowed paper. A drawing. A grand house with ivy climbing its walls. A piano by a sunlit window. 2 boys holding hands in the garden. And in uneven letters, "My name is Marco Cavalli. One day, my brother will find me." The room went still. Adrian held the paper to his chest. He remembered. Back at the mansion, Adrian placed the drawing beside Marco's old portrait and immediately began his search. Private investigators. Public records. Files long closed. Every clue led nowhere. Until a phone call. "We found a record." A Lucas Daniel Cavalli admitted to a shelter 15 years ago. A street artist. Locals called him the Quiet Painter. Where? A mountain town called Blue Harbor. Adrian didn't hesitate. Blue Harbor was alive with color, laughter, and the smell of roasted coffee. Then Lila stopped. "Adrian, look." Under a striped canopy sat a man painting a little girl's portrait. His clothes simple, beard short, eyes calm. But unmistakable. "It's him," Adrian breathed. Lila stepped closer. "Daniel?" The man looked up. Recognition dawned. "Lila," he whispered. Then his gaze shifted to Adrian. Adrian stepped forward. "Marco." The brothers fell into each other's arms. A miracle 30 years in the making. Back at the Cavalli mansion, Marco touched the walls, the photos, the pieces of a life stolen from him. At the piano, he pressed a single key. The note trembled like a voice rediscovered. They spent days rebuilding their bond, talking, crying, remembering. Adrian found a letter from their mother. "If fate ever brings Marco back, tell him the piano still waits. Tell him that love never forgets." That night, they played her favorite nocturne together. The house breathed again. One question remained: who took Marco? In an old file, Adrian found her name. Nora Delgado. A former nurse suspected of trafficking children. Adrian had power. Wealth. Influence. But watching Marco sketch peacefully in the sun, he realized. Revenge would not heal them. In the study, Adrian told Lila and Marco. "I found the woman who took you." Marco asked softly, "What will you do?" "Nothing," Adrian said. "The past has already punished her. What matters now is what we do with the time we still have." From that choice, something larger was born. The Aurora Foundation. Its mission: find missing children, support orphanages, reunite families. Marco designed the logo, 2 boys holding hands before a piano. At the inauguration, Adrian said. "This story began with a promise. Today we turn pain into purpose." Marco added. "Love found us, even after the world tried to take it away." Later, Adrian stood before the portraits, one old, one new. For the first time in his life, he felt peace. Marco joined him. "Maybe the universe was waiting for us to remember each other," he said. "Maybe love doesn't disappear," Adrian replied. "It just waits." Lila watched, her heart full. The mansion, once silent, now sang with life. Sometimes life breaks us apart so love can teach us what truly matters, not wealth, not power, but the courage to forgive, to search, and to believe that love meant to return cannot be buried by time. If this story touched your heart, tell us in the comments which part moved you most. Share it with someone who needs hope today. And don't forget to subscribe. more stories of love, loss, and redemption are waiting to remind you that even in silence, the heart never stops remembering.